I knew the moment I saw Brenda Davenport standing on my driveway with her arms crossed that my Tuesday was about to go sideways. I had just finished installing new gutters on the Morrison house down the street and was heading back to my place when I spotted her there, tapping her foot like she was counting down to some kind of explosion. My home improvement business had been running smoothly for 3 years now, operating right out of my garage in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision of Charlotte, North Carolina. The neighborhood was decent, the houses were nice, and most people minded their own business. Most people, except for Brenda. She was the self-appointed president of our HOA, a position she took more seriously than the Secret Service protecting the president. Brenda was in her mid-50s, always wore these pastel-colored pantsuits that made her look like she was auditioning for a community theater production, and had that particular hairstyle that seemed to defy both gravity and common sense. You know the one. The "I need to speak to your manager" special. "Xavier Paulson," she called out as I pulled my truck into the driveway. She said my full name like a disappointed teacher catching a student passing notes in class. "We need to talk." I killed the engine and stepped out, already feeling the tension building in my shoulders. "Hey, Brenda. What's going on?" "What's going on?" Her voice pitched up about 3 octaves. "What's going on is that your so-called business is turning this residential neighborhood into a commercial zone. I've been documenting vehicles parked on the street in front of your house for weeks now, and I'm putting a stop to it." I glanced at the empty street. There was literally no one parked there at that moment. "Brenda, my customers park on the public street when they come to discuss projects or pick up materials. That's completely legal. It's disruptive, it's unsightly, and it's against HOA regulations." She pulled out a folder from under her arm, and I knew I was in for it. Brenda and her folders were legendary in the neighborhood. She documented everything like she was building a case for the Supreme Court. "Which regulation?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. I had read through the HOA rules when I bought the house. I knew my rights. She flipped through some pages, her finger scanning the text. "Section 7, subsection 4, paragraph 2. No commercial activity that creates excessive traffic or parking congestion shall be conducted on residential properties." Excessive is the key word there, I said. I have maybe 3 or 4 customers a day who stop by, and they park legally on the public street. There's no congestion. Brenda's face was turning that particular shade of red that made me worry about her blood pressure. "I don't care about your interpretation. This ends now, or I'm calling the authorities." "The authorities?" I almost laughed. "You mean the police, for people parking legally on a public street, if that's what it takes." She snapped her folder shut. "You have until the end of the week to cease this operation, or there will be consequences." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, which was 3 doors down from mine. I watched her go, feeling that familiar mix of frustration and disbelief that came with every Brenda encounter. My neighbor Tom was out checking his mailbox, and he gave me a sympathetic shrug. "She got you too, huh?" Tom called over. "Yeah, apparently I'm running some kind of criminal enterprise out of my garage." Tom walked over, shaking his head. "She tried to find me last month because my garbage can was visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup." 2 hours, Xavier. She actually timed it. "That sounds about right," I said. "You should talk to Mike Chen over on Oakwood Drive. He's a lawyer, does some HOA stuff. Might be worth getting his opinion before Brenda goes full nuclear." I thanked Tom and headed inside. My house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch that I had renovated myself when I first bought it. The attached garage had been converted into a workshop and small office where I met with clients, stored materials, and kept my tools organized. It was clean, professional, and completely within my rights as a homeowner. That evening, I called Mike Chen. He remembered me from a neighborhood barbecue the previous summer and agreed to look over my situation. "So she's threatening to call the cops on your customers for parking on the public street?" Mike asked after I explained everything. "That's the gist of it. She can call them all she wants, but unless your customers are blocking driveways, parking in front of fire hydrants, or violating some specific city ordinance, the police aren't going to do anything. Public streets are public streets. The HOA doesn't own them." "That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure." "Just keep doing what you're doing," Mike advised. "If she escalates, document everything. Save any emails, letters, or notices she sends you. If she tries to fine you through the HOA, we can fight it." I felt a little better after talking to Mike, but I knew Brenda wasn't going to let this go. She had that look in her eyes, the one that said she was on a mission from some higher power to rid the neighborhood of people who dared to run legitimate businesses from their homes. Wednesday morning started normal enough. I had 2 appointments scheduled. The first was with a couple who wanted to discuss a kitchen remodel, and the second was with an older gentleman who needed his deck repaired. The couple arrived at 9, parked their Honda Civic on the street directly in front of my house, and we spent about 45 minutes going over designs and getting measurements of their space. They left happy, and I felt good about landing another project. The older gentleman, Mr. Patterson, showed up at 10:30 in his pickup truck. He parked in the same spot the couple had vacated and came inside to show me photos of his deteriorating deck. We were in the middle of discussing wood options when I heard a knock on my door. Not a normal knock, but the kind of aggressive pounding that makes you think someone's either dying or really angry. I excused myself and opened the door to find Brenda standing there with her phone in her hand. "I'm calling the police right now," she announced. "This is harassment. Harassment." I looked past her at Mr. Patterson's truck parked peacefully on the street. "Brenda, that's a customer's vehicle legally parked on a public street. It's commercial traffic in a residential zone. I'm reporting this immediately." She was already dialing. Mr. Patterson had come to the door behind me. "Is there a problem?" he asked, confused. "No, sir," I said. "Just a misunderstanding with the HOA." "I'm not misunderstanding anything," Brenda snapped. "Hello, yes. I need to report illegal parking and commercial activity in a residential neighborhood." I could hear the dispatcher's voice on the other end, though I couldn't make out the words. Brenda launched into a lengthy explanation about how my business was destroying the neighborhood's character and how vehicles were constantly blocking the street. It was so exaggerated that it would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Mr. Patterson looked uncomfortable. "Son, I don't want to cause you any trouble. Maybe I should come back another time." "No, please don't worry about it," I told him. "You're not doing anything wrong, neither am I." Brenda finished her call and looked at me triumphantly. "The police are on their way. We'll see what they have to say about your little operation." She walked across the street and stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Mr. Patterson and I went back inside, but the mood was definitely soured. I apologized for the disruption, and we tried to continue our conversation about the deck repair, but both of us kept glancing out the window. About 15 minutes later, a Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department cruiser pulled up. 2 officers got out, and Brenda immediately descended on them like a hawk on a field mouse. I could see her gesturing wildly, pointing at my house, pointing at Mr. Patterson's truck, and generally carrying on. "I better go out there," I told Mr. Patterson. "I'll come with you," he said. "This is ridiculous." We walked outside, and one of the officers, a tall guy with a name tag that read Officer Morrison, held up a hand to Brenda mid-sentence. "Madam, let me speak with the other parties involved, please." Officer Morrison and his partner, Officer Lee, walked over to us. "Are you the homeowner?" Morrison asked me. "Yes, sir, Xavier Paulson. This is my customer, Mr. Patterson." "And this is your vehicle?" Lee asked Mr. Patterson, pointing to the truck. "Yes, officer. I parked there about 30 minutes ago to discuss some repair work I need done on my deck." Officer Morrison looked at the truck, then at the street, then back at us. "Is there a problem with where the vehicle is parked?" "No, sir," I said. "The woman who called you is the HOA president. She believes that my customers shouldn't be allowed to park on the public street when they come to my house to discuss home improvement projects." Officer Lee actually looked amused. "The public street?" "Yes, sir." Morrison walked over to Brenda, who was still standing there with her folder clutched to her chest. "Madam, can you explain exactly what the violation is here? That man," she pointed at me like I was some kind of criminal mastermind, "is running a commercial business out of his home. His customers park on our street constantly, and it's creating a nuisance." "How many vehicles are parked here currently?" Morrison asked. "One, but earlier there was another one, and yesterday there were two at the same time." Officer Lee walked the length of the street, checking the parking situation. There was plenty of space, no blocked driveways, no fire hydrants being obstructed, nothing. He came back and conferred quietly with Morrison. Morrison turned back to Brenda. "Madam, parking on a public street is not illegal unless the vehicle is violating a specific ordinance. This truck is legally parked. There's no violation here." "But the HOA rules. The HOA doesn't govern public streets," Morrison interrupted. "If you have an issue with someone's business activity, that's a civil matter between you and the homeowner. It's not a police matter unless actual laws are being broken." Brenda's face went through several shades of red and purple. "So you're not going to do anything?" "There's nothing to do, madam. No laws are being broken." Morrison turned to me. "Sir, you're free to continue with your business. Just make sure you and your customers follow all parking ordinances." "Absolutely, officer. Thank you." Morrison looked back at Brenda. "Madam, I need to advise you that making false police reports or calling 911 for non-emergencies can result in charges. Please only call if there's an actual emergency or legitimate legal violation." "This is outrageous," Brenda sputtered. "I pay taxes. I expect the police to protect our neighborhood. We're here to enforce laws, madam, not HOA regulations," Officer Lee said, his tone firm but professional. "Have a good day." The officers got back in their cruiser and drove off. Brenda stood there for a moment, looking like she'd just been slapped with a fish, then stormed back to her house. Mr. Patterson let out a long breath. "Well, that was something," he said. "I'm really sorry about that. Don't apologize. That woman's got some issues," he chuckled. "Reminds me of my ex-wife, actually. Always trying to control everything." We went back inside and finished our discussion. Mr. Patterson hired me for the deck repair, and we scheduled a time for me to come out and assess the full scope of the work. After he left, I sat down at my desk and did exactly what Mike Chen had told me to do. I documented everything. I wrote down the time, the date, what Brenda had said, what the officers had told her, all of it. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. The police had told her to stop. She'd been embarrassed. Surely she would back off now. I should have known better. Thursday morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was an official-looking document on HOA letterhead stating that I was in violation of neighborhood covenants and was being fined $500. The notice listed multiple alleged violations, including commercial activity, excessive traffic, and disturbing the peace. It demanded that I cease all business operations immediately and pay the fine within 30 days or face additional penalties. including potential legal action and liens against my property. I took a photo of the notice and immediately called Mike Chen. "She's really going for it," Mike said after I read him the notice. "But here's the thing, Xavier. She can issue fines all day long, but she has to follow the HOA's own procedures. Did you receive any prior written warnings? Did you get a chance to appear before the HOA board?" "No and no. This is the first official notice I've gotten. Everything else has just been her yelling at me." "Then this fine is invalid. The HOA bylaws almost certainly require a proper notification process and a hearing before they can assess fines. I'll draft a response for you. In the meantime, don't pay anything and keep documenting every interaction." "She's not going to give up, is she?" "People like Brenda rarely do," Mike said, "but we'll handle it legally. Don't let her intimidate you into giving up your livelihood." I spent the rest of the day working on a bathroom renovation for a client across town, trying not to let Brenda's harassment get into my head. I had built a good business, earned a solid reputation, and provided for myself honestly. I wasn't going to let some power-hungry HOA president ruin that. Friday afternoon, I had 3 different customers scheduled to stop by. The first was a young woman who needed her porch rebuilt. The second was a family wanting to add a sunroom. And the third was a contractor I partnered with occasionally who wanted to discuss a larger project we could bid on together. The young woman arrived first, parking her Toyota on the street. We were reviewing the porch situation when I saw Brenda's car cruise by slowly. She was literally patrolling the neighborhood looking for violations. It would have been funny if it wasn't so creepy. The woman left, the family arrived. They parked their minivan in the same spot. We had a great meeting and they were excited about the sunroom project. They left, and my contractor friend Dave showed up in his work van. I should mention that Dave's van was painted with his company logo. It was professional, clean, and clearly marked as a business vehicle. Apparently this was the last straw for Brenda. Dave and I were barely 10 minutes into our conversation when I heard sirens. Not just one police car this time, but 2. They pulled up in front of my house, lights flashing, and my stomach dropped. "What the hell?" Dave said, looking out the window. 4 officers got out of the 2 cruisers, and I recognized Morrison and Lee from before. The other 2 were officers I hadn't seen. And there was Brenda, emerging from her house like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. I went outside, Dave following. "Officers," I greeted them. Officer Morrison looked tired. "Mr. Paulson, we've received another call about parking and commercial activity." "Let me guess from her." I pointed at Brenda, who was speed walking toward us. "That man has 6 different vehicles parked here today. All commercial traffic," Brenda announced loudly, apparently for the benefit of my neighbors who were now coming out to watch the show. "This is a residential neighborhood, and I demand you shut down his illegal business. 6 vehicles." Morrison looked around. "I see 1 van. There were others earlier," Brenda insisted. "Madam, we talked about this yesterday," Officer Lee said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Public street parking is legal." One of the other officers, whose name tag read Sergeant Williams, stepped forward. He had that look of someone who'd seen every kind of nonsense in his career and was fresh out of tolerance for more. "Madam, are you the one who called dispatch and reported a commercial vehicle blocking traffic and creating a hazard?" "Yes, that van right there." She pointed at Dave's vehicle, which was parked perfectly legally with plenty of room for other cars to pass. "That van is not blocking traffic. It's not creating a hazard. It's parked legally on a public street." Williams' voice had that flat, authoritative tone that made it clear he was done with the discussion. "You reported an emergency situation that doesn't exist. It is an emergency." This neighborhood's quality of life is being destroyed. That's not an emergency, madam. That's a civil dispute. Williams looked at Morrison. Did you respond to a call from this address yesterday? Yes, sir. Same complainant, same issue. We advised her then that no laws were being broken and that she should not call unless there's an actual violation. Williams turned back to Brenda. Madam, filing false police reports is a misdemeanor in North Carolina. You're abusing emergency services. This is your final warning. If you call again without a legitimate legal violation, you will be charged. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't threaten me. I have rights as a citizen and as the HOA president. You have the right to contact police when there's a genuine emergency or crime, Williams said. You do not have the right to weaponize emergency services against your neighbors because you don't like their parking. Do I make myself clear? I will be calling your supervisor, Brenda said, her voice shaking with fury. Feel free. Williams handed her a card. That's the number for the department. Ask for Captain Rodriguez. Tell him Sergeant Williams gave you the card. He looked at me. Sir, I apologize for the disruption. You're not doing anything wrong. Continue with your day. The officers returned to their vehicles and left. The neighbors who had come out to watch slowly dispersed, most of them shaking their heads or giving me sympathetic looks. Dave let out a low whistle. Man, that lady really has it out for you. You have no idea. We tried to continue our meeting, but honestly, the momentum was killed. We agreed to discuss the project more over the phone and rescheduled a site visit to the actual property we'd be working on. After Dave left, I sat in my workshop and felt the weight of the whole situation pressing down on me. This was my home, my business, my livelihood. And Brenda was systematically trying to destroy it because of some petty power trip. I called Mike Chen again and told him about the latest incident. Okay, this is actually escalating into something more serious, Mike said. She's harassing you and she's abusing the 911 system. The fact that a sergeant warned her directly is significant. I think it's time we go on the offensive. What do you mean? I mean, we file a formal complaint against her with the HOA board, and we document this pattern of harassment. If she's doing this to you, she's probably done it to others. We build a case for her removal as HOA president and possibly pursue a restraining order if the harassment continues. I just want to run my business in peace. I know, but sometimes you have to fight back to get peace. Let me make some calls. I want to talk to some of your neighbors, get their experiences with Brenda on record. Over the weekend, Mike worked his lawyer magic. Turns out, I wasn't the only person Brenda had terrorized. Tom, my neighbor who'd warned me about her, had a whole list of ridiculous violations she tried to enforce. The family 2 streets over had been harassed about their garden gnomes. Someone else had been fined for having their garage door open for too long. Another neighbor had been reported to the city for supposedly running a daycare without a license when she was just watching her grandkids. Mike compiled all of this into a formal complaint and scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting for the following Wednesday. In North Carolina, HOA boards have to allow homeowners to address grievances, and with Mike's legal pressure, they couldn't refuse. Monday and Tuesday passed without incident. I kept running my business, customers kept coming, and Brenda kept driving by my house at various times, glaring but not approaching. I could tell she was fuming, probably trying to figure out her next move. Wednesday evening came, and the HOA board meeting was held at the community clubhouse. These meetings were usually sparsely attended, maybe a dozen people showing up to hear about landscaping budgets and pool maintenance schedules. This time, the room was packed. Word had spread about the showdown between Brenda and me, and apparently, Everyone wanted to see how it played out. The HOA board consisted of 5 members. Brenda as president, a guy named Richard as vice president, a woman named Patricia as secretary, and 2 at-large members, Frank and Susan. They sat at a long table at the front of the room, looking uncomfortable with the unusually large crowd. Mike and I sat in the front row. He had his briefcase with him, filled with documentation and statements from other homeowners. Brenda kept glancing at us with barely concealed hostility. Richard called the meeting to order and went through the usual preliminary business. Then he looked at his notes and said, "We have a special agenda item tonight. Xavier Paulson has filed a formal complaint regarding HOA management and enforcement practices. Mike Chen, representing Mr. Paulson, has the floor." Mike stood up and addressed the board. He was calm, professional, and devastating. He laid out everything systematically: my legal right to operate a home business, the legality of street parking, the multiple instances of Brenda calling the police without cause, the sergeant's warning about filing false reports, the invalid fine she'd issued without following proper procedures, the pattern of harassment against me and other homeowners. He presented statements from 6 different homeowners about their experiences with Brenda's overreach. He cited specific sections of the HOA bylaws that Brenda had violated in her enforcement actions. He showed photos, documentation, everything. When he finished, the room was silent. Richard looked pale. Patricia was scribbling notes frantically. Frank and Susan exchanged glances. "Mrs. Davenport," Richard said finally, "would you like to respond to these allegations?" Brenda stood up, her face flushed. "Everything I've done has been in the best interest of this community. Mr. Paulson's commercial operation is degrading our property values and violating the spirit of our residential neighborhood. The fact that the police refuse to enforce proper standards is not my fault." "The police refused because no laws were being broken," Mike interjected. "And they warned Mrs. Davenport that she was abusing emergency services." "I was protecting the neighborhood," Brenda's voice rose, "by harassing a homeowner conducting legal activity," Mike shot back. Richard held up his hands. "Let's keep this civil, Mrs. Davenport. Did you issue a fine to Mr. Paulson without a prior hearing or formal warning process?" He was clearly in violation. "That's not what I asked. Did you follow the procedures outlined in our bylaws?" Brenda hesitated. "The situation required immediate action." "That's a no," Patricia said quietly, looking at her copy of the bylaws. Section 12 clearly states that any fine over $100 requires a hearing before the full board. "And calling the police multiple times after being told no laws were broken," Susan added. "That's not protecting the neighborhood, Brenda. That's harassment." "I can't believe this," Brenda said, looking around at her fellow board members. "I've dedicated years to this HOA, and now you're taking his side." "We're not taking sides," Richard said, though he sounded like he very much was taking a side. "We're following the rules and the law. The board needs to discuss this in executive session. We'll take a 15-minute recess." The board members filed into a back room. The crowd erupted in conversation. Several neighbors came up to me, offering support and sharing their own Brenda horror stories. One woman actually thanked me for standing up to her. "She tried to fine my son for parking his car on the street overnight," the woman said. "He was visiting from college. I paid the fine because I didn't know I could fight it. I wish I had." 15 minutes turned into 30, then 45. Finally, the board members returned and took their seats. Richard looked like he'd aged 5 years. "After careful consideration and review of the evidence presented," he began, "the board has made several decisions. First, The fine issued to Mr. Paulson is rescinded and declared invalid. Second, Mr. Paulson's business activity is officially determined to be in compliance with all HOA regulations. Third, the board formally apologizes to Mr. Paulson and the other homeowners who have been subjected to inappropriate enforcement actions. There was applause from the crowd. Brenda sat rigid in her chair. Furthermore, Richard continued, and his voice got heavier, the board has voted to remove Brenda Davenport from her position as HOA president, effective immediately, due to repeated violations of HOA procedures, abuse of authority, and actions that expose the HOA to potential legal liability. The room erupted. Brenda shot to her feet. "You can't do this." "We can and we have," Patricia said. "It's in the bylaws, Brenda. The board can remove an officer with a 4/5 vote for cause. The vote was unanimous." Brenda looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Her mouth worked, but no sound came out. Then she grabbed her folder, her purse, and stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door behind her so hard that the windows rattled. Richard continued, explaining that he would assume the role of president temporarily, until a special election could be held. He also announced that the board would be reviewing all fines and violations issued in the past 2 years to ensure they were valid and properly administered. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to congratulate me and Mike. It felt surreal, like I'd just won some battle I'd never wanted to fight in the first place. "That went better than expected," Mike said as we walked to our cars. "Is it really over?" "From an HOA perspective, yeah. She's off the board, she has no authority. But watch your back for a little while. People who lose power like that sometimes do stupid things." Mike was more right than he knew. Thursday and Friday were blissfully normal. I worked on projects, met with customers, and enjoyed the absence of Brenda's surveillance. My customers parked on the street without incident. The sky didn't fall. The neighborhood didn't collapse into chaos. Life was good. Saturday morning, I was in my workshop organizing materials for a deck installation I was starting Monday when I heard a loud crash from outside. I ran out to find my truck's windshield shattered, glass everywhere. A brick lay on the hood. I looked around, but the street was empty. It was early, not quite 7 in the morning, and most of the neighborhood was still asleep. I pulled out my phone and called the police. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes, but neither was Morrison or Lee. I explained what happened, and they took photos and filed a report. One of them picked up the brick with gloved hands and bagged it as evidence. "Any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked. I hesitated. I didn't have proof, but come on. I've been having issues with my former HOA president. She was removed from her position Wednesday night and wasn't happy about it. "Brenda Davenport?" the other officer asked. "You know her?" "Oh yeah," he said with a knowing look. "She's made quite a few calls lately. You're the guy with the business she was harassing, right?" "That's me." "I'll make sure to note that in the report. Do you have any security cameras?" I didn't, but I sure wished I had. "No, but I'm getting some installed today." After the officers left, I called my insurance company and arranged for the windshield to be replaced. Then I drove to a hardware store and bought 2 high-quality security cameras with night vision and motion detection. I spent the rest of the morning installing them, one covering the front of my house and driveway, the other covering the side and part of the street where I usually parked. I also called Mike and told him what happened. "File that police report with me," he said. "If she's escalating to property damage, we might need that restraining order after all." Sunday was quiet. I kept checking the camera feeds on my phone, maybe a little paranoid, but nothing happened. I caught up on paperwork, prepped for the week's jobs, and tried not to think about Brenda. Monday morning, I headed out early for the deck installation. The job was about 30 minutes away in Concord, and I had a crew of 2 guys meeting me there. The work went smoothly and we made good progress. I didn't get home until after 6 in the evening, tired but satisfied. As I pulled into my driveway, I immediately noticed something was wrong. My garage door was open, which was weird because I always closed it. Then I saw that the door leading from the garage into my house was ajar. Someone had been inside. I stayed in my truck and called 911. The dispatcher told me not to enter the house and that officers were on the way. I sat there, heart pounding, watching my open garage and feeling violated. This was my home. Someone had broken into my home. Morrison and Lee arrived first, followed by another unit. They cleared the house while I waited outside, and when Morrison came back out, his face was grim. "Your place is trashed," he said. "Looks like vandalism more than burglary. You'll need to check if anything's stolen, but from what I can see, they just destroyed things." I went inside with the officers and felt sick. My workshop had been torn apart. Tools were scattered everywhere, some of them damaged or broken. Paint had been poured over my workbench. The office area was destroyed with papers shredded and thrown around, my computer monitor smashed. Inside the house, furniture was overturned, drawers dumped out, more senseless destruction. But weirdly, my TV was still there. My laptop, which had been in my bedroom, was untouched. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. "Does your security camera cover the garage?" Lee asked. "No, just the front and side exterior." We reviewed the footage on my phone. At 10:47 that morning, a silver Honda Accord had pulled up. The driver got out, and even though she was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, I recognized her immediately. Brenda. She had walked up to my garage door, done something to the lock and gotten it open. She disappeared inside for nearly 40 minutes, then came out carrying nothing, got back in her car and drove away. "That's her," I said, showing Morrison. "That's Brenda Davenport." Morrison and Lee exchanged glances. "That's pretty clear footage," Morrison said. "Let me call this in." What happened next moved fast. A detective arrived to take over the investigation. I provided the security footage, the police report from the brick incident, and all the background about Brenda's harassment. The detective, a woman named Detective Sarah Martinez, took detailed notes and photos. "We'll go pick her up now," Martinez said. "This is breaking and entering, vandalism, possibly burglary depending on if she took anything. With the video evidence and the pattern of harassment, we have a solid case." "Can I come?" I asked before thinking better of it. "No, but I'll keep you updated." I spent the next few hours cleaning up the mess and documenting everything for insurance purposes. My homeowner's policy would cover the damage, but the deductible was going to hurt. More than the money, though, was the feeling of violation. Brenda had been in my home, touching my things, destroying my workspace out of pure spite. Around 9 that evening, Detective Martinez called me. "We've arrested Brenda Davenport. She's been charged with breaking and entering, felony vandalism, and criminal mischief. Her bond hearing is tomorrow morning. I thought you'd want to know. Did she admit to it? She claimed she was conducting an HOA inspection, and that, as the former president, she had the authority to enter any property to check for violations. She broke in to conduct an inspection." That's her story. The DA's office will be prosecuting. You'll probably be contacted about giving a statement and possibly testifying if it goes to trial. I thanked her and sat down on my couch, surrounded by the chaos Brenda had created. Mike called shortly after, having heard about the arrest through neighborhood channels. "I'm putting together the restraining order paperwork tonight," he said. "Even if she makes bond, she won't be able to come near you or your property. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. Brenda did make bond, much to my dismay, but the restraining order was granted. She wasn't allowed within 500 feet of me or my home. The criminal case moved forward, with the video evidence making it pretty much open and shut. The HOA board issued a formal apology to me and covered the costs of my insurance deductible as a gesture of goodwill. Richard, now officially the president, seemed like a reasonable person and promised better oversight and transparency going forward. My business actually benefited from all the publicity in a weird way. The local news picked up the story about the HOA president who broke into a homeowner's house, and suddenly, I was getting calls from people who'd seen the coverage and wanted to hire me. Apparently, being the guy who stood up to an abusive HOA was good for business. The criminal trial happened in late October. I testified about the harassment, the brick through my windshield, and the break-in. The security footage was played for the jury. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that she had genuinely believed she had the authority to inspect properties, and that it was all a misunderstanding, but the jury wasn't buying it. The fact that she'd poured paint over my tools and destroyed my office made it clear this wasn't any kind of inspection. She was convicted on all charges. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd apparently dealt with Brenda before on other frivolous matters, sentenced her to 2 years in prison, suspended to 1 year of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, restitution for all damages, and mandatory anger management counseling. "Mrs. Davenport," the judge said during sentencing, "you abused a position of trust in your community, harassed a homeowner conducting legal business, wasted police resources, and then committed multiple crimes when you didn't get your way. Your actions were petty, vindictive, and illegal. I hope you use this time to reflect on your behavior and learn to respect the rights of others." Brenda stood there, her face blank, and accepted the sentence without comment. Her lawyer looked relieved it wasn't actual jail time. After the trial, Mike and I went to a local bar to decompress. "Hell of a few months," he said, raising his beer. "You're telling me." I clinked my bottle against his. "Thanks for everything, Mike. I couldn't have done this without you." "That's what lawyers are for." "Well, good lawyers anyway." He took a drink. "You going to keep running the business from home?" "Absolutely. I'm not letting what happened change that. I've actually been looking at expanding, maybe hiring an apprentice." "Good for you. Don't let the Brendas of the world win." "Never." Life slowly returned to normal after that. Brenda was required to stay away from me as part of her probation, so I never saw her. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved out of Meadowbrook Hills, selling her house and relocating somewhere across town. Good riddance. The new HOA board under Richard's leadership was remarkably reasonable. They updated the bylaws to include better protections for home-based businesses, clearer procedures for violations and fines, and limits on board member authority. Several other neighbors started small businesses from their homes, and nobody batted an eye. I did hire an apprentice, a young guy named Jake who was eager to learn the trade. I also expanded my workshop and got proper business insurance. The security cameras stayed up, though I mostly just used them to check if packages had been delivered. One afternoon in December, I was working on a custom bookshelf in my garage when a car pulled up. My hand instinctively went to my phone, ready to check the camera, but then I saw it was Officer Morrison in his personal vehicle. He got out and walked over, smiling. "Hey, Xavier. Got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" I wanted to stop by off-duty and say congratulations on how everything turned out. That whole situation was insane. "Thanks. I appreciate you and Lee being straight with me through all of it. We just did our jobs." But between you and me, it was satisfying to see someone like Brenda actually face consequences. Usually, people like that just move on to tormenting someone else. He looked at my workshop. Business looks good. It's been great, actually. Best year I've ever had. Glad to hear it. Listen, my wife and I are looking to renovate our bathroom. You available for a quote? I laughed. For you? Absolutely. Let me get my calendar. We set up a time for me to come look at his bathroom, and he left with a wave. I went back to work on the bookshelf, feeling genuinely content. The whole nightmare with Brenda had been stressful and frustrating, but I'd stood my ground, fought back legally, and won. More importantly, I'd helped change the HOA for the better and made it easier for other homeowners to live their lives without harassment. Christmas came and went. The neighborhood had a holiday party at the clubhouse, and I actually went, something I'd never done before. It was nice. People were friendly. The new board members were there talking about plans for the upcoming year, and everything felt like an actual community rather than a dictatorship. Tom found me by the snack table and handed me a beer. You're like a hero around here, you know that. I don't know about that. I'm serious. You stood up to Brenda when the rest of us just complained behind her back. This place is so much better now. It was Mike Chen, really. He did all the legal work. Sure, but you didn't back down, that matters. Tom raised his beer. To standing up to tyrants. To reasonable HOAs, I countered. Now that's just unrealistic, Tom joked, and we both laughed. As I drove home that night, past houses decorated with Christmas lights and inflatable Santas, I thought about how much had changed since that day in June when Brenda had first confronted me on my driveway. It felt like a lifetime ago. Running a business from home had its challenges, but dealing with an abusive HOA president hadn't been one I'd expected. The fact that she'd escalated to calling the cops on my legally parked customers, then to property damage, then to breaking into my house, still seemed surreal. But it had happened, and I'd dealt with it. The courts had done their job. The HOA had cleaned house. The police had enforced the actual law rather than one person's petty grievances. The system, for all its flaws, had actually worked. I pulled into my driveway, the security camera's motion light coming on automatically. My garage was organized and fully stocked with tools and materials. My truck had a new windshield. My house was repaired and back to normal. My business was thriving. I sat in the truck for a moment, just looking at my home. This was mine. I'd earned it, worked for it, and defended it. Nobody was going to take that away from me because they didn't like customers parking on a public street. My phone buzzed with a text from a new client wanting to schedule a consultation for a kitchen remodel. I replied that I could meet them Thursday afternoon at my home office, and they said they'd see me then. They'd park on the street in front of my house. And that would be perfectly legal, perfectly normal, and perfectly fine. I went inside, fed my dog, who I haven't mentioned until now but definitely existed the whole time, made myself dinner, and settled in for the evening. Life was good. Business was good. The neighborhood was good. And somewhere across town, Brenda Davenport was probably completing her community service hours and attending anger management classes, learning the hard way that being HOA president didn't give you the right to harass people, make false police reports, or break into homes. The officers had told her to stop calling them about legal parking. She hadn't listened. She'd escalated instead, breaking the law herself in the process. And now she was paying the price. I couldn't help but feel that was exactly how it should be. The system had worked. Justice had been served. And I was free to run my business in peace, with my customers parking legally on the public street, exactly as they had every right to do. It was a good ending to a crazy chapter of my life. One I hoped never to repeat, but one that had taught me the importance of standing up for yourself, knowing your rights, and not letting bullies win just because they claim to have authority. The HOA wars were over. I had won. And all I'd really wanted was to live my life and run my business without harassment. Sometimes the simplest goals require the biggest fights, but they're worth it.